Signor De Niro, the waiter whispered, leaning toward his table. The police. In the lounge. De Niro slowly set down his glass. His eyes showed no surprise, only irritated exhaustion, like a man who had seen too much to be shocked anymore. He rose unhurriedly and headed to the lobby. At that moment, a shadow burst through the door. "Hands up, everyone!" shouted a man in a black mask. Another had already vaulted the counter and rushed to the safe hidden behind the bar. Seconds ticked by. A pistol gleamed under the lamplight. One guest froze with a fork in his mouth. A fur-clad woman, an older lady from the Upper East Side, clutched her chest. Her companion, a stock analyst in a glossy suit, began stammering. But De Niro didn't flinch. "Do you know whose restaurant this is?" he asked calmly. The robber turned. "Shut it, old man!" he barked, aiming the barrel at the legend's chest. And then came a thud. Not a gunshot. The safe's door swung open, and one of the robbers grabbed something bulky. Not money. A black box, unremarkable but labeled FINEST. He didn't have time to stuff it into his bag. De Niro nodded, almost imperceptibly. A red light blinked in the corner, alarm triggered. Cameras, GPS, security, all activated at once. "You don't even know what you just stole," the actor whispered, "or how much blood it cost." The robbers vanished, melting away like ghosts, leaving only panic and the slam of doors. Police stormed in, too late. Guests screamed. A reporter at a table was already typing furiously on her phone. But Robert De Niro remained unmoved. Only one detective, a young black man in a rumpled suit, approached and whispered, "It's that box, isn't it, from that case?" "It's all recorded," De Niro replied. But now, things are different. Outside, cameras were already waiting. News spread instantly. Armed robbery at Robert De Niro's restaurant. Unknown thieves stole an artifact tied to a sealed 1994 case. But few knew that case was never truly closed. Those who underestimated him remembered only the comedies. Analyze This, Meet the Parents. They forgot Raging Bull or Bronx Tale. More importantly, they forgot who he was off-screen, the power he wielded, and that his silence always carried the weight of a grenade with its pin pulled. Now the safe was open. The artifact was gone. Old enemies, long unspoken of, had awakened. But Robert De Niro was no longer acting. In a dark office smelling of tired police equipment plastic, cold coffee, and a faint trace of fear, Robert De Niro sat motionless, arms crossed. The screen flickered with footage from his restaurant's cameras, a place he'd built not just with bricks but with memories. He watched those memories being torn apart. "That's him," Detective Marshall muttered, pointing his pen at a hooded silhouette. "He heads straight for the safe. Moves like he knows the building's layout." "Stop," De Niro whispered. "Rewind." A few seconds. The officer rewound. The image flickered, showing the hallway behind the bar again. 3 figures. One tall and broad, another jittery, swaying. But the third... "Zoom in," De Niro said, his voice rough. The camera tightened on the frame. Light from the kitchen window glinted on the wrist of a guy in a black jacket. And in that moment, De Niro shot to his feet. The screen froze, as if sensing something alive. On the guy's wrist was a tattoo. Old, faded, the outline of a key with 3 prongs, drawn just like the one his son Nick had sketched as a child. It was a symbol they'd jokingly used to mark their secret places, hiding spots for Christmas gifts and letters. "What's that?" the detective asked, startled. "That's..." De Niro inhaled, as if breathing for the first time in minutes. "That's the same tattoo I got with Nick on the beach in Sag Harbor. He was 7. I thought we were just messing around." Marshall raised his eyebrows. "That guy? His profile? His eyes? His walk?" De Niro swallowed. "My grandson was supposed to be dead. He was gone, along with Lily. I was at the funeral." "Maybe not everyone was buried," the detective said softly. "Do you have a relative's DNA?" "I kept Nick's shirt, at home, framed. You can test it." The officer nodded. But De Niro wasn't listening anymore. He sank into the chair, pulling an old lighter from his pocket. He ran his thumb over its brass surface. It was his son's, the only thing that still smelled of the time before the tragedy. If this was really his grandson, he'd been kept in the shadows. Someone had hidden the truth. And someone had sent the boy to rob his own grandfather. The night draped the city in dark velvet, and even the skyscraper lights seemed muted, fogged by memories of the past. Robert De Niro's restaurant stood alone, shattered windows, severed security wires, and a crushing silence hanging over the empty halls, like the aftermath of a storm. His empire of taste and elegance was ravaged, but the greatest loss wasn't broken furniture or missing dishes. Something far more valuable had been stolen. In a modest but stern office above the restaurant, under the cold glow of a lamp, De Niro met with Detective Marcus, a man who'd always been close but was now his closest ally in this tangled case. They reviewed security footage, replaying every moment of the robbery. The screen flickered, showing looping frames. Robert studied every movement, every silhouette, but what caught his eye wasn't the thief. It was what lay off frame. The empty safe. Its door ajar like a jaw that had just swallowed the deepest secrets. No signs of forced entry, no brute force, as if the safe's owner had handed over the keys. "This isn't a regular robbery." Robert's voice was low, laced with fury and confusion. Someone knew exactly where to look and what to take. Marcus nodded, scrubbing the video forward and back, searching for missed details. But the most unsettling part wasn't what was stolen. It was who might be behind it. The restaurant wasn't just a venue. It was a vault where prominent figures, politicians, businessmen, stars of the past, kept their darkest secrets. Personal documents, compromising files, records that could topple empires and ruin careers. They trusted Robert more than anyone, and now that trust had been betrayed. By morning, De Niro slipped on an old trench coat and stepped into the city. No celebrity mask, just a man seeking answers. His first stop was Lauren Hazelton, widow of a senator who died years ago under mysterious circumstances. Their bond was old, woven with shared secrets and silent support. In the spacious living room of her penthouse, where old books lined shelves and retro photos of New York hung on the walls, Lauren held a glass of whiskey, her hands trembling. "Robert," she whispered as he sat beside her, "if those documents were really stolen, it's not just a threat to politicians. It's murder. Of careers, reputations, even lives." She leaned closer, a shadow of doubt crossing her face. The senator hid things that could destroy not just him but those in his shadow. Now it's in the hands of people who will stop at nothing. De Niro swallowed a heavy knot of dread, grasping the weight of her words. This wasn't just theft. It was a war with stakes higher than he'd imagined. From Lauren, Robert moved on to others, old clients and friends who'd once entrusted him with their most precious belongings. Each meeting took place in the hush of speakeasies, cozy high-end restaurants, or lavish apartments where echoes of past victories and defeats lingered in every detail. They were all afraid. Not of the robbers, but of the truth that could detonate in their lives like dynamite. Injustice and hypocrisy bound them together, a system where privilege and influence cloaked dark secrets. In conversations over whiskey and cigars, hints emerged, words unspoken but screaming in the air. If this gets out, everything collapses. We've seen what happens to those who expose the truth. Robert, be careful. You don't know who you're dealing with. Each meeting sharpened the sense of danger but also clarified the stakes. His restaurant was a facade for a far uglier game. They hadn't just lost money or documents, they'd lost the illusion of safety. That evening, as the city drowned in lights and noise, Robert stood alone in the empty restaurant. In his hands was a sheet of notes summarizing everything he'd learned. Then his phone rang. An unknown number. The voice on the other end was cold, calm, almost indifferent. "You think this was just a robbery? You're wrong, Robert. This is only the beginning. Soon you'll see that it's not just you on your knees but your entire city. The clash with an unknown enemy, betrayal, and the past lay ahead." But a spark ignited in Robert's eyes. He knew he couldn't back down. The echo of those final words lingered as Robert locked the restaurant door behind him. The city's darkness pressed in, but a fire of resolve burned within. The enemy remained faceless, but he'd taken his first step, no longer hiding in the shadows, but seizing control. The next day, Robert met Marcus in a quiet cafe, far from cameras and prying ears. They devised a plan. Move cautiously, gather evidence piece by piece, rebuild trust with those willing to help. But their biggest asset was someone who could stay invisible and slip into any closed circle. "I have an idea," Robert said, locking eyes with the detective. "We need someone who knows this city like the back of their hand. Someone who can blend in without raising suspicion." Marcus grinned through his beard. "You mean Lucy, don't you?" Lucy, a former investigative journalist, had made waves with her sharp mind and tenacity, unafraid to ask questions others dodged. She was always a step ahead. Robert knew it was a risk, but there was no other way. After a call, Lucy agreed to meet in a small bar on the city's outskirts. She arrived in a dark coat, a small bag slung over her shoulder, her eyes blazing with unquenchable fire. "You know this isn't just a robbery," she said as they settled at a corner table. "Big players are involved, and they won't stop at anything." "We need information," Robert replied, "and time's against us." Their work began with analyzing everything available: camera footage, witness statements, lists of clients who'd stored items in the safes. Lucy quickly spotted oddities: doctored documents, gaps in security systems, and a few friendly contacts in the police department. Meanwhile, Robert visited old acquaintances who weren't afraid to speak the truth, albeit cautiously. Each conversation was a step through a maze of secrets, where anyone could be ally or enemy. Then came the unexpected. One evening, walking home, Robert sensed he was being followed. Instead of panicking, he stopped, turned, and met the gaze of a man in a dark coat. "You're getting too close to the truth, Robert," the stranger said coldly. "Maybe it's time to back off." Robert only smiled. "I back off only when the whole truth is out." In that moment, he knew. The game was just beginning, and the stakes were far higher than he'd imagined. The days that followed unspooled like a fast-forwarded film reel. Robert and Lucy worked closely, piecing together fragments that formed a sinister picture. The restaurant robbery wasn't just a heist, but a meticulously planned operation to cover up far worse crimes. The client's secret safes held not just valuables, but compromising material on powerful people, those who'd built empires on lies and impunity. That information was the robbers' true target. One evening, as Lucy handed Robert a packet of new evidence, the door swung open. A man stepped in. Tall, perpetually in shadow, with a gaze that could cut through steel. "Enough games," he said, his voice brooking no argument. "You don't know who you're messing with, Robert." But Robert stood firm. He met the threat's eyes and felt at last that this was what his entire career had been building toward. Not just fame, but a moment when truth became an unstoppable force. Then the impossible happened. Lucy hit record, and her camera captured everything, from the threats to a confession that could shake the foundations of a corrupt world. That night was a turning point. The light of truth pierced the darkness, and the public's reaction exceeded their wildest hopes. An explosion of outrage and support that breathed new life into hope. Robert felt his fight wasn't in vain. That age was no sentence but a call to be the voice of justice. The story was just beginning, but its hero was ready to fight to the end.